So
Okay, guys.
Fred, I'm going to hand it over to you as the Director of Commercialization to kind of talk a little bit about our program and why we're here today.
Yeah, okay. So many of you know me. I'm the Director of Commercialization at Praxis. Our commercialization initiative is unique in its capacity to accelerate SCI technologies, propelling research and innovations forward into the real world. For those of you unfamiliar with our activities, I'm going to briefly describe what our achievements. Commercialization is one of the 4 core programs at Praxis. Advances our institute's goals of bringing greater number of innovations to Canadian and international markets that will directly benefit people with SCI. Last year, we hosted 2 pitch events, which we showcased 16 startups that presented innovative technologies to improve the lives of individuals with SCI. These 2 events resulted in 4 winners, which received financial awards to support the continued development of their technologies. Also, as a result of these events, a couple of startups received funding from the participating investors. In March this year, we supported the Synapse Life Science Competition, which is held annually in Hamilton in partnership with the McMaster University. At this event, we awarded the Praxis Prize, a financial incentive given to the 3 most innovative projects in SCI. Also, soon to be announced is a new competition in which Praxis will participate in partnership with the University of Waterloo, Center of Bioengineering and Biotechnology to fund the most promising project in SCI. We're also supporting several projects and institutions around the world on the development of solutions for individuals with SCI, including the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, the Georgia Institute of Technology, the Indian Spinal Injury Center in collaboration with IC Impacts, the Creative Destruction Lab West Accelerator, UBC School of Biomedical Engineering, and of course, the Praxis SCI Accelerate program, which started in April. SCI Accelerate is a 12-week acceleration program for startup ventures with solutions that address care and cure-related treatments and overall quality of life of individuals with SCI. We pair our expertise in SCI research, knowledge translation, direct consumer engagement, and commercialization with specialized coaching, regulatory and reimbursement, as well as help ventures build market validation and sales strategy. Over this past few weeks, we had the honor of working with a select group of 5 ventures, which are now part of the Praxis SCI Accelerate cohort. These ventures have exceptional potential for making an impact on the health and well-being of individuals with SCI. They're carefully selected by a panel of SCI consumers, researchers, commercial leaders in healthcare as addressing key challenges for people with SCI, but also with a potential to transform healthcare outcomes for the broader community. Of course, the Praxis Accelerate program is made possible to the amazing and generous support of the Western Economic Diversification of Canada, the Genome BC, University of Waterloo, and also Osler, Housekeeping, and Harcourt. Thank you very much. Rush, up to you. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Fred. Bill, glad you could join us. So
Yes.
if you'd like to share a little bit around, why are we here today before we get started?
Sure. Thanks everybody for your patience. My apologies. Obviously, I'm Bill, and I've been the CEO of the Institute for some time, the Praxis Spinal Cord Institute. I'd like to welcome formally everybody to the Accelerate webinar. We're really excited about this. It's been a product of a lot of work from our team and volunteer mentors. It's been so far just an amazing experience. I'd like to introduce Praxis as well and highlight some of the recent achievements that are transforming the lives of people with spinal cord injury. First, I'd like to acknowledge, Fred and others for envisioning the format of this event, which was originally supposed to be held at the Blessed Spinal Cord Center. And of course, it's had to migrate to this virtual platform. We were all a little bit apprehensive about how that would go, but so far it's gone just wonderfully due to the efforts of people on this call. We're all adapting to these unprecedented times, and by creatively finding solutions to continue our work, and I'm certainly thankful that we can all be together today. At Praxis, we have a vision that we'll have a world without paralysis after spinal cord injury. That's a big dream. It's not going to happen overnight, but it is the kind of ideal future state we want to aspire to. As a not-for-profit organization, our role is to lead global collaboration in spinal cord injury research, innovation, and care. The Institute has achieved significant recognition as an outstanding charity, including accreditation through Imagine Canada's Standards of Excellence, and has been ranked in consecutive years by Money Sense and Maclean's magazine as one of Canada's top-rated charities, in fact, #1 in 2018, and puts us in a rarefied company. We're very proud of these kinds of achievements, but of course, what's more important is impact for the people that we serve. So to achieve our vision, we take a multidisciplinary approach to maximize our impact. This enables us to move the most promising ideas out of the lab into a standard practice of care, into the marketplace, and ultimately into the hands of people who need it most. By working to address all of these areas simultaneously and with national and international partners within the SCI community and beyond, we are uniquely positioned to make exceptional improvements in the health of people with spinal cord injury. Over the years, Praxis has funded over 120 SCI research, innovation, and care projects, personifying the bridge between problem and solution. Praxis itself is Greek for moving knowledge into action. In addition, we've assembled an amazing group of partners to conduct some of our work. So for example, Praxis and the UBC's School of Biomedical Engineering announced in 2019 a partnership to expand Engineers in Scrubs, the school's flagship program in biomedical engineering. Engineers in Scrubs trains some of Canada's most talented biomedical engineering students to work directly with clinicians and patients, providing their first opportunity for any patient contact to solve problems that will improve outcomes for those with chronic and costly health conditions, such as spinal cord injuries. In 2019, Praxis partners with Mars Discovery District on a $200,000 spinal cord rehabilitation innovation challenge aimed at improving the lives of individuals living with SCI by seeking tools that measure interventions and their impact on health outcomes. With the help and support of our network of partners, including our world-class experts, Praxis has made significant progress over the last decade. Realizing our vision is no small task. It takes a team of dedicated people working together, driven by individuals living with SCI, aligned in sharing key values like innovation, collaboration, and a commitment to exceptional outcomes. Through our commercialization program, we bring together the best-in-class research, commercialization, and consumer experts in the area of SCI to provide innovators with the guidance and mentorship needed to scale and develop their innovation locally and internationally. One of the differentiating features of our commercialization program is the ongoing involvement of people with SCI in the whole process. Our consumer program team actively participates in accelerating the commercialization process for innovative therapeutics and medical devices for overcoming paralysis and secondary complications. So we have a built-in a way to assess the market within our own organization. So now of course, you've heard from Fred already. And thanks, Fred, for those opening remarks and for filling in and smoothing out that hiccup. But with that, I'll return it to you, Arushi, and I'm very pleased to participate today and delighted to be able to listen to the presentations from here on.
Thanks so much, Bill and Fred. I think one piece of context that some of you have and a lot of you don't is that this program was developed in several months in a very short timeline. Some of the top accelerators in the world. really sort of looked at us sort of a little askew on what we'd be able to achieve. And I think that's testament to the amazing leadership and vision that both of you have. So, you know, this program would not be possible with the type of support we've received. And I think, you know, you have these events where we thank people, but as the program manager, being on the ground and actually helping to run and design this, it really is true. So, you know, the Western Economic Diversification Fund for kind of supporting our vision in doing something really groundbreaking. Thank you very much. We do note your participation in this event also, and look forward to your comments and to each of the companies, as well as our sort of two new partners, Genome BC, and we'll hear shortly from sort of Pat Brady, as well as University of Waterloo, who's a key funding partner and collaborator on not only this, but several other projects down the pipeline. So I want to introduce Pat from Genome BC to briefly talk a little bit around the partnership and kind of why he's here. He's the Director of Industry, the Industry Innovation Program at Genome BC. So Pat, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thanks, Arushi. Hello, everybody. I'll start with a bit of background around Genome BC. I know quite a number of you are from out of the province. So Genome BC is a non-profit research organization that leads genomics innovation on Canada's West Coast and facilitates the adoption of genomics into society, in particular the healthcare system, agri-food, and natural resource sectors. Since our inception in 2000, Genome BC has invested, and actually its partners have invested roughly $1 billion in genomics research. Our major investors are the province of BC, the government of Canada, and the Western Economic Diversification of Canada. And this funding is also complemented by partnerships with many national, international, public, and private funding organizations. Genome BC's research focus has evolved as well over the past 20 years, and we are moving much closer now towards the entrepreneurial side of things. And that leads to my role. I joined Genome BC about 4 years ago from the venture capital field, and I've basically been involved with two major programs here on the entrepreneurial private sector side. One is a venture fund we call the I² Fund. It's a commercialization stage life science fund, and we've made 11 investments to date. Our investment range is roughly $500,000 to $1 million, and we invest in almost all sectors, and in particular in the human healthcare field. Although Genome BC would make you think that we're focused on the genomics and omics field, and in human healthcare we actually open it up and pretty well look at all types of technologies beyond omics, including medical devices, precision medicine, and digital health. The other program I'm involved with that is actually the program supporting or helping to support Praxis here is called our Entrepreneurial Partnership Program, and we are sponsoring several accelerators across BC. The others, apart from Praxis, are the CDL West program, E at UBC, and SFU Innovates. And we are really, really excited to be and to help Praxis launch its SCI Accelerator. And it's probably one of the few worldwide that is focused on the SCI field. I think Praxis will be able to offer entrepreneurs an unparalleled and focused worldwide network in the SCI field. And you'll also be able to access the patient population and therapists and medical specialists in this field. And as we all know, focus is probably the second most popular F word in the business. Anyways, I look forward to meeting, or I guess virtually seeing all of you. And I'm keen to watch you build your ventures and glean everything you can from the Praxis network. And definitely interested in getting to know all of the fellow entrepreneurs here as we move along. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pat. And I think I'm going to just put a few folks on the spot here is, do use this opportunity if, you hear something about Genome BC to connect with people and keep in mind who you want to get in touch with. We can't all be in person, but doesn't mean you can't connect and sort of connect on joint and collaborative opportunities. Thanks so much, Pat. I want to introduce Karim from the University of Waterloo, in particular the Center for Bioengineering and Biotechnology at the University of Waterloo. University of Waterloo, we luckily met a few of your colleagues, Karim, I think late last year, and then I think we met in January, and we so appreciate your support for our entrepreneurship on the other side of the coast, and how collaborative you were in supporting this vision and this new program as a university, as a very prestigious university. So Karim, I'll hand it over to you.
Here. Thank you so much, Arushi. First of all, I just want to extend a very hearty congratulations to all the company picks in your first cohort. I think this is a really special time for startups. It's messy, it's difficult, but it's a lot of fun. And the people who take bets on startups really are the visionaries who believe in crazy ideas. So, you know, my kudos to Praxis and your team as well. The University of Waterloo, as you know, has a strong reputation in the field of entrepreneurship. They're very much encouraging of entrepreneurial ventures. Prior to this meeting, I thought I would do a little bit of digging to look at some numbers. I just took on the role of the executive director literally 5 days ago. So this is a nice opportunity. So it was to my happy surprise that more than 18% of tech founders in Canada have graduated from the University of Waterloo. And the Waterloo entrepreneurs have raised maybe more than $7 billion in investments. So this is a nice statistic as far as Waterloo goes. And I think parts of that come from the fact that Waterloo has the creator-owned intellectual property policy, but at the same time, they've also got the cooperative education program, which of course brings me to a really good point. With the current COVID crisis, we have quite a few good co-op students, should any of the cohort companies be interested, because they have not been able to go overseas due to travel restrictions. So this is a great chance to get co-op students for really, really cheap, because I think the government is subsidizing quite a bit. So sorry, I'll stop plugging students at this point, but I thought this would be good for startups because you're always looking for deals, and this would be a way to do it. For the cohort companies, I also want to draw their attention to the various undergrad and graduate education programs related to entrepreneurship and business, specifically the Conrad School of Entrepreneurship and Business. If you haven't seen it, feel free to reach out, have a look on the web, and see what kind of programs we have in place. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to say all that much more, but I do want to reiterate our great appreciation and support for Praxis. We're very happy to partner with you, and we look forward to a very productive relationship in the future.
Thanks so much, Karim. We really appreciate it, and I'm actually fully supportive of plugging your students. They're fantastic students, and you know what I love about my job is I get to bring research, I get to touch research, I get to work with the amazing consumer team, I get to work with commercial world, and I think that's exactly what we're trying to do, is bring those worlds together. And so the more we plug opportunities, offer opportunities, and kind of make this a really informal and an event where we all get something out of it and identify new opportunities, I'm all for supporting that. So, you know, do use the chat to share any ideas you have. This is an informal event. This is about collaborating. This is about getting ideas going. So thank you so much, Karim.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Great. So now we're going to get to the stuff that we've all been waiting for, which are the company presentations. Before we get started, you know, to open the presentations, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that, you know, to make a land acknowledgement. I know this is a virtual event, but I do want to acknowledge that I right now sit, and a number of you sit on the unceded territory of the Salish peoples, the Slail, Wet'suwet'en people, and the Musqueam Nations people. And I know some of you are on the East Coast, and so we just want to acknowledge the unceded territories that we are still within, hopefully safe during this time, even though we're not meeting in person. Okay, so to get started today, we're going to have 8-minute pitches from each of the companies. And I think you've been posted the order, and I will announce them. And then you're going to have 10 minutes for Q&A. And I'm going to be very pushy here, and Danilo is as well, is we want the Q&A to be interactive. We want you to ask questions that are actually on your mind. I will, on occasion, poke some of you to ask questions because I know you have questions. So please don't make me do that. Just ask questions. We want it to be a dialogue. That's why we have 10 minutes for Q&A and 8 minutes for presentation. So our first presenter today, before I announce them, Danilo, am I missing anything in terms of housekeeping items and muting or anything like that, or am I good? We're good? Okay, great. So if I remember any housekeeping items, I will bring them up, but I think we're pretty good for now. So our first company today is BioInteractive Technologies. They are a BC company, and I actually met them when they were presenting last year, I think in the summer, as one of our investor events. And so it's really great to see that full circle and see them join us. So BioInteractive Technologies, who have been endorsed by the Mayo Clinic and Techstars, is a medical device and digital health company developing intelligent wearables for physical therapy using its patent-pending Tensor musculoskeletal sensing technology. BIT's flagship product, the Tensor wristband, assesses range of motion, provides instantaneous guidance and feedback on rehab exercises via a mobile app, and monitors hand and wrist use to encourage healthy ergonomics. So I want to introduce them, and Gautam, who's the CTO, who will be presenting on behalf of BIT.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Perfect. Thanks for the introduction, Arushi. So hi, as Arushi said, my name is Gautam Sudarangani. I'm one of the co-founders of BioInteractive Technologies. We are a medical device and digital health company developing intelligent wearables for physical therapy. We've developed our first product that I have here on my wrist today, the Tensor wristband, to help patients suffering from hand, wrist, and elbow impairments due to things such as stroke, spinal cord injury, and even orthopedic conditions such as arthritis, wrist fractures, carpal tunnel syndrome, tennis elbow, and golfer's elbow. So the problem with these sort of injuries is that they're incredibly common and incredibly, ooh, I'm sorry, I just realized that you can't see my slides. Give me 1 second. Can you all see my slides now? Yes?
Yes.
Perfect. Sorry about that. The best laid plans. Okay. So the problem with the injuries that I mentioned is that they are incredibly common and frustrating to live with. As you all know, there are about 17,000 spinal cord injuries a year and over 800,000 strokes a year in North America. What's more, over 25 million people in the US alone suffer from wrist fractures, carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, and golfer's elbow. The common thread among all of these conditions is that patients end up seeking some form of physical therapy, which in the US market alone is a $34 billion market opportunity. And these numbers are continuing to rise. So it's clearly a big problem. But what's the real unmet need? Well, today, if you have one of these injuries, you typically get a fixed number of sessions spread out over several months of physical therapy. So you only get to see your physio once every couple of weeks. In between those sessions, you're sent home with some verbal instructions or at best a printout of hand exercises, which ends up languishing in a drawer or getting misplaced. And so patients have told us that they don't feel guided when they're not with their therapists. And therapists have told us that they don't have the means to provide the guidance that they know that their patients need in order to recover. This leads to frustration and fear because people need to get back to using their hands and restating quality of life. We help with this problem using our patent-pending Tensor wristband, which again I'm wearing my wrist today, which is capable of very accurately tracking the hand, the wrist, and the elbow. We combine the data from the wristband with a companion app to help therapists guide their patients through their recovery journey. So in specific, we provide 3 features. The first is range of motion assessment, so patients can quantify their recovery process and stay motivated. Secondly, gamified biofeedback. So while staying at home, patients are able to know and get immediate feedback on whether they're performing their exercises as prescribed by their therapists. And thirdly, always-on ergonomics monitoring, where we are monitoring their hand activity and warning them when they've exceeded hand activity or moved into an ergonomic position that could lead to further injury down the road. We do all of this using proprietary technology that my team and I pioneered during our grad studies. So this is a deep tech project. Just join me on this quick exercise, and Urushi and Fred have seen this more often than they'd like to, but if you could take your left hand and grab your right wrist, and if you wiggle your fingers and make a fist and open your hand, you'll feel your muscles and tendons moving up against your other hand. What you feel is exactly what we measure. It's, as I said, it's a patent-pending technology, but more importantly, its accuracy has been independently validated and has been published in world-leading scientific journals. And we are currently supporting clinical trials across Canada. Not only is TENSA solving an unmet need, it's also addressing a sizable market opportunity. Just considering the outpatient rehab market for the conditions that we can help with results in a $12 billion market opportunity. The plan is to market TENSA as a tool that therapists can send home with the 25 million patients that they see every year to enable virtual physical therapy. And as we know, there's increasing reimbursement coming into place due to remote patient monitoring and telehealth initiatives. A quick look at our management team. My co-founder and CEO, Lucas, is a serial entrepreneur and led Canada's only and first cyborg team to the world's first cyborg Olympics in Zurich, where he used the same technology that we're discussing today to have a transradial amputee control a bionic hand and compete on the world stage, which was a proud moment for us. I personally was the Associate Director of Engineering at Lung Pacer Medical, a Class 3 medical device startup that's a success story based out of Vancouver. I joined them as a really early employee and grew with them all the way through Series A IDE approvals through the FDA's Breakthrough Devices Program, which was a phenomenal learning experience. In short, when it comes to digital health and tracking the hand, we are the experts. However, we know what we don't know, and we've assembled a great list of advisors. Some of them to highlight: Dr. Christy Lane, who is the co-founder of the Wearables Health Lab and the chair of physical therapy at Mount Royal; Dr. Alex Seal, who is a leading hand surgeon here in Vancouver, BC; Sid Radolgoda, who is also a leading physiotherapist and hand therapist here in Vancouver, BC; and finally, Torsten Kanisch, who is an executive officer at AstraZeneca. A quick comment about our COVID response. I wanted to share that we just launched our new website at www.tensa.me. And really what we're trying to do here is we know that there are folks out there who are unable to access physical therapy due to everything going on with COVID-19 and social distancing measures. And so we've released numerous hand exercises and stretches and videos on our website to try and help folks out there. And we're also working really hard to get TENSA kits out into the community to those that need it the most. So if you know anyone who might benefit from something like that, I'd appreciate if you check out our website and share it with them. And with that, I invite you to join us in keeping hands healthy and keeping people active. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gautam.
Thank you.
Great. So do we have any questions coming up from any folks? Don't be shy. I know there's some questions.
Questions can be posted on the Q&A section.
Yeah. So if you have any questions, post them in the Q&A, and then we can answer them. Gautam can answer them.
Well, I have a question. Gautam, tell us when you're planning to go to market.
So we are planning to be in market in the next month and a half to 2 months. We're trying to go as fast as possible because everything, as I say, that's going on with COVID-19 has really reinforced the need to try and conduct physical therapy virtually, and that's what we're facilitating. So very, very soon, but shameless plug again for our website, check out tensa.me because every week we provide an updated timeline on that.
What about your clinical trials? Tell us.
So we've conducted a number of studies validating the accuracy of the technology, one of them being at GF Strong Center affiliated with UBC. We've also done a number of pilot studies across Vancouver and are gearing up to do proof of value trials where we essentially validate the benefit of the technology in the coming year. I see that there's a question from James. Please share some details about the 3 formats of the device. So I think, James, I think the question's around the 3 main features of the device. And if that's the case, then let me elaborate. So the first thing that we're capable of, go with the first one first. The first thing that we're capable of doing is providing a really accurate estimate of range of motion of the wrist and the forearm. So flexion, extension, radial ulnar deviation, pronation, supination. This is a standard key performance index, if you will, of tracking the patient's recovery through the rehabilitation process. And so we make it simple and easy for people to be able to do that. The second thing is gamified biofeedback as part of rehab exercises. So what I mean by that is a physical therapist says, I want you to do X repetitions of the following exercises. We actually end up gamifying that, so the patient has to control some virtual object on a screen, and by playing a game and controlling that virtual object, they achieve their rehab exercises. And finally, we provide ergonomics monitoring. And by that, I mean, if they move their hand into a position that their therapist does not want them to move into, for instance, if you're using a mouse and you're constantly in radial deviation, the device will vibrate and tell you to knock it out and come back to neutral so you don't end up creating further injury. So that was the first one. The second thing was expected price range. So we're still working out the variants for the price range when it comes to sending it home with the patient. And at the moment we are in research mode, so the price is quite high. Pat says, what's the pricing reimbursement model for Tensor? Still in the process of validating that. That's part of why we're starting very small in Vancouver itself. But to speak briefly about it, the idea would be that the idea would be that the device would be sent home, the data would go back to the therapist, and the therapist would be compensated via remote patient monitoring codes, in the United States at least, in order to provide feedback to the patient. And that is something that has been made available to medical device companies and users in the last year and a half or so.
And just to kind of elaborate on the question, Gautam, do you see a role for sort of some insurers in Canada to cover this? And I know you're still in early stages, but could you talk a little bit about what that would look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are 2 paths, right? So there's a lot of bundle-based payment initiatives taking place, both in Canada and the US. So for example, if you've got a total knee replacement or something along those lines, there are bundle payments that cover the entire patient journey. And so we think the same thing could apply in the hand injury space, because we now enable the tracking of that to take place. And that's one of our key objectives moving into our clinical trials, is to show how the overall process, where physical therapy when combined with Tensor leads to improved outcomes and higher efficiencies.
Great. And I think, I'll add just before we go to the next question, a quick plug I will do on your behalf is that, if any folks in the ecosystem think of insurers who would want to hear a little bit about what BIT is doing before clinical trials, just to understand their philosophy, I'm sure they'd welcome those conversations in Canada particularly, because we do want to make it accessible in Canada. We do have another question, Gautam, so go ahead.
Thanks for the plug, Arushi. I appreciate it. Yes, exactly. So Rod asked, with so many different wearable technologies available, what are you doing to convince users to remove their existing product and use yours? Are you providing any similar features of existing wearables? So great question, and I'll answer it in 2 ways. So the first thing is, we're starting in the population of people who have injuries and are hence looking for products that are going to help them recover or help them manage their injuries. So we are not looking to compete with consumer wearable companies. We're not looking to compete with the Apple Watch. And we think that the patient population that will adopt it are those that really need it. Quick example, if you've got a wrist fracture, you're going to use this product for about 6 months. Once you've recovered, you'll go back to using your Apple Watch. However, can you all still see my slides?
No, I think you have to read.
Okay, sorry, bear with me for 1 second here. Let's figure out how to do that. However, because our technology sits on the strap itself, we don't have anything to do with the housing of the electronics or anything like that. The ultimate vision is to create a smart strap that can plug into any smart watch. And so we would not be looking to compete for real estate on your wrist. We would be looking to augment the tool you already wear on your wrist.
Awesome. That was a great question. Thank you, Rod. Okay, we have a final minute here. So any last questions before we jump on? I don't see any. Okay.
I'm going to just, oh, there's another question. So
okay,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, somebody else is asking.
Yeah,
I give preference to Chris. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has the biofeedback been tested with individuals who may have impaired or absent sensation around their wrist? Is there sound or second option? So the first is, yes, we have tested it in certain populations that have impaired, not absent sensation around the wrist. But you're right. So we've got 3 domains of biofeedback. We've got both the vibrations that I talked about, but there's also sound and there's also visuals. And both as part of the games and as part of the feedback the app gives you when you log in. And again, if you go to tensor.me, we've got some live animations and screenshots from my app that show the sort of feedback that we provide. But it's all 3 domains. That's a great question.
And just so you know, Gautam, Chris is one of our clinical experts. So and in our team who does a lot of clinical practice. So really good person to be asking the questions and good person to kind of know as an expert in this field. Okay, I think we're good in terms of questions. So thanks, everyone. If you have any other questions, you can always pop them in the Q&A box and say for BIT, and we will look to address them as we go through. I do want to introduce the next company, however. Thank you so much, Gautam, for your
Thank you all. Yeah.
Okay, so our next company this afternoon/evening is Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream. So we heard of Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream. They're out of Nova Scotia. We heard of them through the Canadian ecosystem. So I know we always say, oh, the Canadian ecosystem could be better, but what's been really interesting for us as we've launched this is we've really seen East and West Coast collaboration. So we heard about this company all the way in Nova Scotia, and here they are participating virtually in a BC Accelerator. So Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream is a physician-led Nova Scotian company that has developed a fast-acting, complex compounded, non-prescription skin cream to effectively treat moisture-associated skin damage, MASD. Dubbed Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream by nurses out in the hospital and practices. It's a single-step remedy that has been safely used by Dr. Gordon in intensive care and other units in Canadian teaching hospitals for over 20 years. So without further ado, I want to hand it over to Anne and Johanna to present Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream and the amazing work they've done over there.
Hi, hello from Nova Scotia. It's very nice to be with you today. I'm Johanna Mercer.
And I'm Ann Gordon, the CTO of Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream. Thank you for this opportunity. 20 years ago, an ICU nurse asked me for a cream for a patient's nasty rash from diarrhea and incontinence. When the pharmacist couldn't find a product with an active ingredient that I knew was needed, I wrote an order for a compounded cream and thought nothing more of it. It turns out the nurses loved it and dubbed it Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream. It's been used safely in hospitals ever since. Now, Dr. Gordon's Bum Cream addresses a group of rashes called moisture-associated skin damage. These rashes occur anywhere 2 skin surfaces rub together in a warm, moist environment. You might know it as sweat rash, or jock itch, or diaper rash. It's itchy, painful, and leads to skin breakdown and possible superinfection. For those people who suffer from incontinence and mobility issues, this rash will significantly increase the risk of developing pressure sores. Now, moisture-associated skin damage can occur anywhere and everywhere. In Canada, 1.3 million in care, 8.4 in the United States, and 19.4 million in Europe, or 30 million in care have moisture-associated skin damage on any given day. That's 45 million over the next 20 years as the population ages, putting enormous pressure on our healthcare system. Now, it can be an expensive, complicated, frustrating rash to treat. It's generally treated in a stepwise trial and error approach with drying agents, various barrier creams, antifungal and antibacterial agents alone or in combination, each step adding to product costs, pharmacy and doctors' costs, and a lot of caregiver time and patient discomfort. Our cream is simple, inexpensive, and effective. It resolves all the issues in less than a week at a fraction of the cost using a fraction of nursing time. Now, there are lots of products out there that can manage moisture-associated skin damage. There are barrier creams, antifungal creams, combination products. My formula heals, infection, dries, protects, is non-prescription, and works in less than a week. But this is what you really need to know. The nurses need a product that heals quickly to prevent skin breakdown, infection, and pressure sores. It needs to be safe for repeated use and application because this rash is chronic and recurrent. And this is where my cream really delivers. We know this because we have tracked its use for 8 years in our 100-bed acute care hospital. We started at about 70, and by the end of this past year, we've had 350 treatments that have been dispensed. Once our nurses use it, they choose it. It appears that they're using it over other common antifungal creams. Over 8 years, 1,300 patients have been treated with no side effects. This is what the nurses tell us. The rash appears to improve by the end of my shift. It's easy to use and stays where I put it. That's important. My patients ask for it by name. I've recently learned that my colleagues keep a precious stash of it at home for family bum cream emergencies. People ask me to buy it all the time.
And so this is why we've decided to commercialize this cream. Leading into the business, in terms of IP, we are exploring patent protection for our formulation and are moving forward with trademark. Currently, we're operating under trade secret, and clinical trials, when they're completed, will offer us additional IP protection and first-to-market advantage. We are going to obtain a DIN, a drug identification number from Health Canada, because we will be a new drug. And we're watching with real interest the proposed FDA changes to their CARE Act regarding OTC products. I think they may impact on us. Although it's a multi-agent product, our cream has rather strong margins. Each week, we hand mix a kilo of the cream in hospital, and this costs us about $3 for 50 grams. The cost of manufacturing and packaging in a GMP lab are still being determined, but we anticipate a cost of about $4 to $5 per tube. And currently, we're working with a competitive price point of $40 a tube for institutional sales. Now, while our cream has a very wide consumer application, that market isn't reflected in these numbers. Our focus is really at the moment on the institutional market because it's highly labor and skin sensitive, and there's tremendous need, as we've seen, and scalability. Now, the incidence of moisture-associated skin damage ranges from 6 to 52%, and this depends on your age, your health, your mobility, and continence. We've used a 6% incidence to calculate this TAM. And the smallest sector is acute care, where we've established 6% of patients to develop moisture-associated skin damage, and that's 10 million in Canada. Nursing homes account for 17%, which is 36 million. The largest and growing sector is formal home care, and this is estimated at 126 million. And these numbers will increase as we boomers age over the next 20 years. And this means that the institutional TAM in the three sectors that we're focusing on is 172 million in Canada, 1.2 billion in the US, and 2.7 billion in Europe. That's 4 billion annually, and increasing at least 20, some say as much as 50% by 2040. So once we've completed our regulatories, our plan is to sell directly to institutions in the Maritimes because this is where we live and where we're well connected. In 23-24, we'll extend into the Canadian market through partnerships and ideally reaching the informal home care market through online sales. And by 25, we anticipate licensing or perhaps acquisition will take our product into the US and beyond. Now, why are we doing all of this? Leah DeVoe, the head of the Victorian Order of Nurses here in the Annapolis Valley, told us, it's a vicious cycle. If I had one product that was balanced to address each symptom, that would be life-changing. This is what keeps us going every morning.
Now, a little bit about us. Johanna has been taking ideas and turning them into reality all her life in many sectors. She has had corporate clients, including Pfizer, AIDS, Canada, and BC Nurses Union. In 2012, she founded the Booker School in Port Williams and built a beautiful school that recently won the Governor General's Award for Teaching Excellence.
Yeah, and Anne trained at McGill in biochemistry initially, then went on to study medicine with a subspecialty in respiratory. She has been an intensive care clinician and a really honored teacher for 25 years at McGill UBC, and now for Dalhousie here at our small Regional Valley Hospital in Nova Scotia. And I think it's her experience and her patient empathy that helped her to find a simple solution for a frustrating and, frankly, we think overlooked primary care problem. We have a most extraordinary team of patient and wise advisors, including Dr. Gabe Kalmar, who I'm sure you all know, and Dr. Hans Kierstead at the Praxis Institute. Vanessa Grant is our lawyer with Norton Rose Fulbright in Toronto. Christina Aon is the Director General at SRAP in Montreal, and a host of others with experience in business, health, finance, and accounting. Currently, we have completed our R&D and customer discovery for $42,000. I know that's minuscule, but we actually did it. In the next 18 to 24 months, depending on COVID, we'll need $600,000 to complete our clinical trials, develop a skincare protocol for our potential customers, and obtain that drug identification number from Health Canada. And to move quickly, we'll need an additional $2 million to run our pilot production, engage a sales team, improve our traction. Then hopefully by 23, 24, we'll be able to move into the Canadian market and beyond with a value chain partner. So at this point, we have secured $350,000 thanks for the generous support from Praxis that brought that number up. And we're currently seeking an additional $250,000 to complete our regulatory phase. And that's where we stand now. So thank you very much. We'd be glad to take any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Johanna and Anne. So any questions, folks? I don't see any open questions. Otherwise, Fred, do you want to start with, you know, I know you get a lot of FaceTime with Johanna and Anne, but do you want to start with a question?
Well, I just saw, yeah. Thanks for letting me ask the question. So Anne, can you tell everybody that is absolutely no, for 20 years, the screen has been used, and there's absolutely no side effects, zero, nada.
Absolutely none that we have ever been aware of. Now, you have to understand that my pharmacists have to mix this skin cream, and it's a nuisance for them. And it certainly started out in our ICU, who the pharmacists are very, very vigilant. So they are so confident with the medication that was actually stock in British Columbia. So the nurse could use it even without an order. So we've had no complications at all.
And this final question, I know I could go on, but what about, I just want everybody to know, are you, because you're the only respirologist in your hospital and you're treating patients with COVID, right? So are you using your cream on those patients?
Yeah, it's the COVID has changed our world, I have to say. There's a couple of ways in which we've been using it. In the really sick patients in the ICU, they're actually unable to move for long periods of time. We're trying to minimize the nurse contact with the patient. Normally in the ICU, the nurse would be in and out with a patient 6 times an hour. We're trying to minimize that to maybe 4 times a day. So they need a product that works really quickly, and they only have to put it on that they can have minimal contact. These patients have fever for long periods of time. So they're sweating and they can't move, and they get into skin breakdown. Some of the positioning we have to put them in also puts them at high risk for breakdown. So we actually have been using it as well.
And also, it's been noted that healthcare workers who have to wear masks with plastic and occlusive clothing and latex gloves have been developing skin breakdown, and in a highly infectious environment, this is
It's a problem.
a problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You've got a bunch of questions, so this is great.
Yeah.
So Rod Foley, our director of IT at Praxis, asks, it's not just for bums, but are you finding the product name prevents people from using it elsewhere?
It certainly hasn't stopped the nurses, but I have to say, tell you, if there's a skin fold that's red, they're going to put Dr. Gordon's bum cream on it. But in the real world, as we move forward, it's really one of our questions was whether we broaden it out, maybe find another name. I've always wanted to call it Nurses' Choices, but the nurses poo-pooed that, at least so far. But that is an issue that we're going to address, hopefully with the consumer group that we're going to be working with as we go forward.
Awesome. And you know, that's something in the comment in the chat. Feel free to share your thoughts. If that's something the company is kind of debating, you can add and say, oh, this is what I think. Like, we want to, you know, feel free to share your opinions in the chat. David Granville, one of our wonderful mentors, who's also leads research at ICORD and at Vancouver Coastal Health, has very kindly joined us. Thank you very much, David. He asks, could you provide us with a little more information regarding the clinical trial you're going to put through? Is it going to be versus standard of care or other creams? I know this is something you've been talking a lot about.
Yeah, we're really working on that right now. Certainly what I would be looking at would be setting it up against one of the standard creams that you would use, either looking at an outpatient situation or in the inpatient context. The literature is it's quite variable. There is no one product that we use beyond any other. There's a whole series of barrier creams, so it would be up against a plain barrier cream. That would be what I would be looking for, which is standard of care.
And we're hoping that we might have a second center, and it might be in association with Praxis and the center in Vancouver.
Great. So Pat from Genome BC, he asks, will hospitals and long-term care facilities be your major buyers, or will you go direct to consumer?
Really, the largest population is home care, to be honest. And we're also very concerned about nursing homes. Persons in hospital do have people taking care of them. Mm-hmm. It's a smaller market, but they do have nurses and physicians. I think our concern is those that need a good product and can serve themselves in the home care market.
So we're really using our institutional connections to get a little traction, but our real goal is formal and informal home care, because that's where the bums are.
So is it correct in understanding that you're going to start kind of B2B, so going to institutions, that's going to be your first push, but the vision is to have this, you know, the consumer to be empowered to use this?
Yeah, and that's how we would hope to design the trials, is to be able to ultimately to get it to that market.
Great, makes sense. Oh, I love this question from Marianne, our director of HR. Have your pharmacists who are currently dispensing the creams signed CAs or NDAs?
Yes.
Everybody's got NDAs.
Yeah, they're big fans.
Yeah,
big fans.
Yeah, they're really wonderfully supportive and excited.
And helpful in sometimes tweaking how we do things. So they've been very supportive.
Awesome. And I think, you know, Marianne keeps us honest, and I think it's just a good reminder that, you know, you've got the secret sauce, right? So David has another question. He says he wonders about the name and if there would be any apprehension buying this over the counter versus using a different.
That's what we're thinking. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know if humor helps to open a conversation about a condition that, you know, there's a lot of stigma and shame around these conditions. So, and the nurses named it, so it's in honor of the nurses, but we're not sure if an amusing name helps to break down the stigma and start the conversation, or is it embarrassing and you just wouldn't buy it off a shelf. But, you know, maybe if it's online sale, does it matter?
It's a really good point, and I think something in the
Yeah.
consumer survey, we're going to be doing a consumer survey later in the program, and getting that feedback. So that, thank you so much, David. That's a wonderful question. So we have two more questions, and then we're going to wrap up here. So James Laskin, a researcher in residence, says, you know, please can you share how this product can be used as a peri-wound product in wound management?
I'm sorry, a
Peri-wound?
a peri-wound?
Peri-wound, yeah.
Yeah, it's again, it's the same issues, just a different location. So the damage and the pathophysiology of the damage of a peri-wound wound is the same as it is with intertrigo or from diarrhea. If the skin is constantly exposed to moisture, the skin breaks down in a certain way. So it doesn't actually matter where it is. If you're using it to keep the edge of that wound dry, it will work.
Great. Thank you
Smaller
so much.
market. Smaller market.
Small market.
Okay, Pat has a final question before we wrap up here. He says, are the ingredients currently, the way you're dispensing it, listed on the label?
No.
Okay. So I wonder, I'm interested, Pat, in what your thoughts are behind that. So maybe you'll comment on that, or get to meet Johanna and Anne and share your feedback on that. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. Great to see all the questions coming in. Let's get started with the next company. Thank you so much, Anne and Johanna, for a wonderful presentation.
Lovely to meet you all.
Great. So next up, we have PathMaker Neurosystems. So we got to know PathMaker Neurosystems from John Chernesky, who was at ISCOS, I believe, and met Nader. And he passed, you know, this technology to me and said, you know, have a look at this. And then, you know, it just stuck in my inbox. And then very luckily, you know, we reached out and we chatted to Nader and his colleague Jerry. And they were, I think, either in France or in the US at that time. And we said, do you want to, you know, join this accelerator we're doing? We've never done this before in BC. And, you know, this is what we're doing. And I think what I loved about that first call, Nader, you were ready to join from the first call. You trusted us before, you know, everyone else. So, you know, I remember that conversation well. So I'll quickly introduce PathMaker and what they do. So, you know, PathMaker Neurosystems is a clinical stage neuromodulation company developing breakthrough non-invasive systems for the treatment of patients with serious neurological disorders, including SCI, ALS, and stroke. PathMaker's proprietary technology uses synchronized stimulation at multiple points along the neural axis to modulate the activity of spinal circuits. PathMaker has a dominant IP portfolio with 35 issued patents and has won numerous innovation awards in the US and Europe. So without further ado, Nader, as CEO, please go ahead and present.
Thank you, Arushi. And yes, when I first heard about the program, I thought it sounded wonderful, and we were highly interested from day one. So thank you for having us participate. Slides should be presenting now. Okay, that's coming across.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll get started. So PathMaker, as Arushi mentioned, is a clinical stage neuromodulation company. We're headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, and we were founded to treat patients with serious neurological disorders without the need for surgery or drugs. We're focused on two primary conditions at the present time. They include spasticity, which we'll be talking to you about, as well as ALS. We're quickly advancing two non-invasive products that allow us to treat these serious neurological disorders. BioRegulator is our company's first product, and this device is meant to treat spasticity. We've been advancing it over the last few years, and we'll be telling you more about it. And out of BioRegulator, we have a new device that's emerged called ALS Suppressor, which is intended to treat ALS. So our company has pioneered a new approach to neuromodulation based on multi-site neuromodulation. So we have pioneered the understanding that to really modulate the circuits involved with specific conditions such as spasticity and muscle weakness, you really have to intervene at multiple sites along the neural axis. For example, to treat spasticity, we are combining spinal stimulation done using anodal TSDCS together with peripheral stimulation done using DCS. And we implement this by applying 4 different electrodes along the neural axis. And as you can see from the figure, that sets up actually 3 different circuits. And this is how we could actually suppress the firing of hyperexcitable spinal motor neurons. Last year, we actually published a paper where we actually determined the molecular mechanism by which this works. In the spinal cord injury model in mice, we discovered that when you induce a spinal cord injury, a protein called NKCC1, which is a neuronal sodium potassium chloride cotransporter, actually gets elevated. And it results in high intracellular chloride and results in hyperexcitability and spasticity ultimately. Surprisingly, we found that when you treat with anodal stimulation using our technology, we can directly suppress levels of NKCC1, bring down chloride, reduce hyperexcitability, and reduce spasticity. This was a very significant paper that caused a lot of interest. Spasticity, as everyone knows, is a very serious condition. It's found not only in spinal cord injury, but found in stroke, multiple sclerosis, CP, as well as numerous other conditions. Overall, it affects over 12 million patients worldwide, and so this is a real problem for many people. And it really is a state characterized by increased muscle tone and painful muscle contractions. How is it treated? Well, there are very few treatment options for treating spasticity. This slide summarizes them. They include oral medications, which have been around for several decades, and these are usually first line. There's the implantable baclofen pump, and most recently it's become a botulinum toxin, and that's used first line in France and many other countries. There's also surgery that you could have, and that's pretty much a last resort. So we're developing a device that will be the first non-invasive and safe neuromodulation device for the treatment of spasticity. Digging a bit deeper on the market for this, what we're really addressing is an established multi-billion-dollar market, right now primarily being served by botulinum toxin injection. If you look at the numbers, there's actually the treatment of spasticity and dystonia accounts for more than 50% of the revenues for botulinum toxin products. And in 2017, that was over $1.5 billion that was utilized for spasticity. So we're directly addressing a multi-billion-dollar market opportunity. And we're doing that using this device. This is MyoRegulator. This is the world's first device that allows for the non-invasive treatment of spasticity. It's a microprocessor-controlled device that delivers our double stim therapy using disposable single-use encoded electrodes. It has a rechargeable battery, so it's not plugged into the wall during patient treatment. And in this COVID era, we've designed a handle for portability, and it's been built to specific requirements that allow this device to be taken to the patient's home. We're working on commercializing this by next year, and we expect product sales to be beginning next year. With the device in hand, we began showing this product, and Jerry and I were in Europe at 2 major conferences showing the device. This is actually, as Arushi mentioned, how we met John. And we had lots of interest developed in this technology by showing it and giving a few presentations there. On the regulatory side, we're working on expedited clearance in both Europe and US, and also we're now learning a lot about Canada. In Europe, this is a Class 2A low-risk device, and we're running a trial currently, a pivotal European study, and we actually expect issuance of the CE mark in Q2 of next year. In US, FDA selected this device as one of the first breakthrough products for its expedited access pathway, and we're working on getting FDA clearance in about 1.5 to 2 years after CE mark. We've already published our first-in-man paper, and this is using this device for the treatment of upper limb spasticity in patients who had stroke. This paper was published mid last year, working with the Northwell Health team in the US, and really demonstrated that this technology is very effective in reducing spasticity, and the effects actually persisted for 5 weeks after stimulation. We're now running a pivotal European study, and this is happening at the Brain and Spine Institute in Paris. This trial is now about 80% complete. It's been put on hold, of course, because of the COVID situation. We're this time looking at lower limb spasticity, and we're doing 3-month follow-up. So this has been moving forward very nicely. And I have to say, we're very excited now to be working with the Praxis team to really think about what a spinal cord injury trial would look like. And we hope to have that trial designed in the next 1 to 2 months so we could think about actually implementing it. In terms of IP, we already have 35 issued patents for our company. The MyoRegulator device is already protected by 9 issued US and foreign patents, so we're in pretty good shape on the IP side. We've been able to move forward as rapidly as we have because really of the team that we've been able to bring together. Our Chief Technology Officer, Jerry Jennings, is here on the call. He's actually brought 7 medical devices to market and has been at both large and small companies. Our VP of Regulatory and Clinical has been at US FDA and then at Boston Scientific. And Jake Maslow is our Chief IP Officer, and he's a patent lawyer, and he's been moving this forward very nicely. I'm very pleased to mention that just this past week, we brought aboard a new chairman of the board of directors. Mr. Hakami actually was president at Medtronic, where he ran the diabetes group and had 6,000 people reporting to him. Our company's scientific founder is Dr. Zagul Ahmed at CUNY CSI, and we're very pleased of the recognition we've been able to get. And again, we're very excited to be working with Praxis on this. In summary, we have first-in-class neuromodulation products that allow the treatment of serious neurological disorders without the need for drugs or surgery. Our first 2 products treat spasticity and ALS. We'll have regulatory approval next year, and we'll have revenue starting next year. We've received over $6.4 million of non-dilutive capital, and we're working to establish global collaborations. Thank you so much for your interest, and I'd be happy to take some questions. And if anyone's interested to talk further, we can also do that offline. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nader, and thank you for the presentation. Any questions, folks, before I'm going to hand it over to Fred to do the opening question. Fred, what do you want to ask? I know you spent time with Nader and Jerry, but what do you want to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Nader. Great presentation. Thank you, Jerry. Just tell us a little bit about your plans to open a branch in Canada.
Yes, well, we're very interested to explore how we could do that. So we've already been through this process. We've established actually a subsidiary in France. We've established an office. We have employees there. So we've already been through this. So right now we're in the process of learning how we could do this also in Canada. Our objectives for this program really are to design a clinical study in spinal cord injury spasticity and figure out where we're going to run it and how we could finance that trial. So if that requires us to be there in person, setting up an office, we will do that.
Yeah, and are you planning to have some R&D presence here as well?
Yes, I view a clinical trial definitely as R&D. So if we can run a clinical trial there, I would say that's a significant part of R&D.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other questions here? James, John, you folks. There, Nancy. Nancy has a question. So Nancy Thurgood, Nader is part of our research team. Hopefully you'll get to meet her soon. She is asking what class of device this would be in Canada.
Yes. So this would be, I believe, a class 2 device. Jerry, if you'd like to talk further about it, that would be great.
Yes, that's right. We've been in discussions with Health Canada, and we're pretty certain it would be a class 2 device in Canada.
Great. That's great. So Pat from Genome BC, he's asking, what are the clinical endpoints in your clinical trials that you're sort of working towards? And I think Jerry and Nader, if you can talk, briefly of your past trials, what your endpoints have been, and then I know some of the discussion happening in SCI as well.
Yes, sure. I mean, so far the human trials that we've ran have been in post-stroke spasticity. And there we've been looking at the modified Tardieu scale. We've been looking at gait. We've been looking at the upper extremity Fugel-Meyer. We're looking at spinal cord excitability as measured by the H reflex, as well as quality of life measures and patient self-assessments. All those have been built into the more formal trial that we're currently 80% completion at in France. And moving forward, we want to build on our learnings about the trials. Each one we'd like to design better, and we're currently in the process of learning what are the right endpoints to be using for spinal cord injury.
Great. Thanks so much, Nader. So Vanessa Noonan, who you know well, she's asking, what have been the patients' experiences so far in using the PathMaker Neurosystems MyRegulator?
Yes, from our U.S. trial, we actually had a number of quotes from the patients. And first of all, I'll say that there were no safety issues whatsoever. There were no SAEs reported. This is a safe, painless treatment. And we had comments that they could actually lift a spoon and feed themselves, and they could raise their arm. And we had some very promising anecdotal comments from them.
Great. James, researcher in residence, is asking, can you share the need for device-specific encoded electrodes? That's part of, I know, your model, and what's the justification for those encoded electrodes?
Yeah, sure. I'll hand that over to Jerry to comment on.
Sure, thank you. Well, it turns out that the nature of our stimulation is direct current, DC, and that presents a particular challenge in terms of getting that current to pass through the skin. And so we've been working with some very well-established electrode manufacturers to formulate a custom electrode architecture. And it turns out that the electrode itself is consumed during the treatment process and can really only be used for a single treatment.
Great. Thank you. Chris Walden, Nader, as I mentioned earlier, Chris is one of our clinical experts who kind of works day by day with people with SCI. So it'll be great for you to meet her at some point. She's asking, what has been the treatment frequency and duration required for the effects lasting 5 weeks? And I know that's a different protocol for stroke, but I think it'll be useful just to preface.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just to elaborate on the protocol, in both the US and the France studies that we've been doing, patients receive 5 consecutive days of stimulation, 20 minutes a day. After 5 days of stimulation, we have seen that the effects persist for at least 5 weeks. And for our current study in France, we're going out to 3 months. I'll also mention we've done animal studies, and in the animal studies as well, we're seeing effects persisting 4 to 5 weeks following stimulation. And the reason is, we believe it's related to NKCC1. So this protein is being upregulated in injury, and then our technology is suppressing it. When it's suppressed, there's going to be less spasticity, but of course, the protein is going to regenerate. So it'll be very interesting to see how long this therapeutic effect lasts.
Sorry, Nader, could you quickly repeat the protocol? Because I think it bugged out for a moment.
Oh, sure. Yeah, apologies. So yeah, 5 consecutive days of treatment, 20 minutes a day of stimulation.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, we have a few more questions and then we'll probably wrap up here. So Carly from the University of Waterloo, hi Carly, says, just wants to clarify that, this device is this device going to be used by users to wear all the time or for a certain period of time during the day? So just to further clarify that, Nader, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So this device is actually meant to be used in either the clinical setting or potentially the patient's home. So this is not a wearable device. It's a device that's about 20 pounds or so. And it's meant to be, a device that is sitting on a table. The electrodes connect to the body, and you administer the therapy.
Great, thank you, Carly. Pat is asking, what is your pricing reimbursement model in the U.S.?
Yes. So our pricing in the U.S., we are planning at this point to be pricing between $60,000 to $75,000 for the device itself, with single-use encoded disposable electrodes about $125 to $150 each. In terms of reimbursement, we're going to be looking at we've already looked at several comparables, and I'll just mention botulinum toxin injection in the U.S. is reimbursed by Medicare at between $8,000 to $10,000 a year per patient for spasticity. Another comparable I'll mention is transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, which is used for the treatment of depression. And in the US, insurance companies pay for about 40 days of treatment, and they reimburse about $8,000 to $12,000 actually. So there are some comparables that we're looking at. We're going to want our own CPT codes for this first-in-class unique device. That, of course, takes time to get to.
Great, thank you. Question from Nancy, member of our research team. When this device is delivered into the clinic or the hospital, Nader and Jerry, what is the time to set that up? Is it individualized? Do we need an engineer to set that up? I really like this question. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Sure. I'll turn it over to our engineer, Jerry, please.
It's actually very simple to use. It's a portable device. It does not require any special installation considerations. So it's basically taking it out of the box, unpacking it, and it does not require an engineer to set it up, although we would recommend a session of training with a trained clinician.
Great. And what does that training look like? Is that just like a virtual session you can run with a clinician?
Yes, we've trained physicians in our clinical studies, and we've been able to do that quite successfully and effectively in a morning training session.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Jerry and Nader, for a wonderful presentation, and thank you, everyone, for the awesome questions.
Thank you, everyone.
Great. So I'd like to introduce our next company here, Cathbuddy. So Cathbuddy actually presented to us as part of our pitch in Toronto late last year. I believe it was October, November last year. I do see some folks from OBI participating and want to acknowledge so much collaboration they've done behind the scenes and partnering with us and meeting our companies in also inspiring a lot of our programming in terms of how do we support companies. So thank you so much, OBI, for being here. So Cathbuddy, just as a brief overview here, is developing a reusable intermittent urinary catheter system that aims to improve the standard of care and reduce UTI incidence for individuals who use intermittent catheters to urinate. A reusable system enables a company to amortize the cost of production for safer, premium catheters over multiple uses. The system will help reduce healthcare costs related to catheters and UTIs, while also reducing environmental waste caused by single-use catheterization. I'd also like to introduce Souvik Paul, who is the CEO of Cathbuddy. Take it away, Souvik.
Thanks, Arushi. I'm going to share my screen now. Hi, everyone. My name is Souvik Paul. I'm the CEO and founder of Cathbuddy, where our mission is to reduce urinary tract infections with reusable urinary catheters. And if that seems like a random place to start a business, the reason that I'm focused and our company's focused on urinary catheterization is because our connection to the problem is personal. 6 years ago, in 2014, my good friend Karina was injured in a car accident. She's a T2, T3 complete, and started to use catheters to urinate as the result of her spinal cord injury. And because of her catheter usage, she suffers from recurring and frequent urinary tract infections. And I know that COVID-19 is like the only thing that people can think about. It's the reason why we're all meeting virtually today. But I think it's also really important to remember that the pandemic disproportionately impacts people such as catheter users. In this post on the spinal cord injuries subreddit, the poster noted that their biggest fear during this time is that they'll stop receiving their medical supplies. And the one thing that they stress about the most is their catheters. Later on in the thread, people commented that this person should reuse their catheters and should go to YouTube of all places to figure out how to do that. And I think that's a situation that no one should find themselves in. And it's part of our mission at Cathbuddy to prevent this. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with catheters, this is what a standard straight intermittent urinary catheter looks like. It's 16 inches long for men, 8 inches long for women. And every product on the market is labeled as single use only by the FDA and other regulatory bodies. And the problem is that catheters like this one cause infections at an alarming rate. Repeated catheterization can lead to a 40 to 60% annual complicated UTI risk, and complicated UTIs can worsen into chronic kidney disease and even death. And while there are safer technologies on the market like closed catheter systems or no-touch catheter systems that can reduce UTI incidence by 30%, they're typically 4 times as expensive as standard catheters, and so insurers typically don't cover them, and they're too expensive for people to afford out of pocket. And in general, single-use solutions generate 85 million pounds of plastic waste annually. And this is true even though recent studies have shown that single-use catheterization doesn't actually improve outcomes when compared to reuse that's done under repeatable, verifiable protocols. Part of our mission at Cathbuddy is to reduce this environmental waste by 99% through the implementation of our reusable catheter system. It consists of a reusable catheter and insertion aid that provide the feature set and UTI reduction benefit of a no-touch catheter system, and our patented catheter sterilizer that could sterilize a day's supply simultaneously and utilizes RFID to track catheter use over time. To dive a little bit deeper into the design of our insertion aid, we've integrated some of the features that make no-touch catheters so safe, such as an introducer tip and an insertion sleeve that prevent pathogen transfer from a non-sterile surface like the hands or the urethral meatus to the catheter. We've also designed proprietary anatomically compatible insertion aid heads that simplify the process of insertion for many of our users, whether they're men or women, which is extremely important in the spinal cord injury community because limited dexterity is oftentimes a consequence of SCI. And looking at the market, catheter technology hasn't meaningfully changed over the last 40 years. This billion-dollar industry has been marked by this trade-off between affordable standard catheters that get you sick and safe, no-touch or closed catheters. And off-label reuse is prevalent in the market. Our competitors haven't figured out a way to stop that. With Cathbuddy, we're providing people with catheters that are both affordable and safe. Our RFID tracking allows us to prevent people from reusing our catheters too much. And we have the ability to provide services like teleurology and electronic health record integration with our system at a future date. Our ultimate goal is to actually embed sensors directly into the catheters themselves so that we can help people and their physicians manage their care in a manner that's preventative and not reactive like it is today. And through this system, we can offer our product at a fraction of the cost of the current single-use solutions. Under Medicare coverage in the States, an annual supply of standard catheters is around $4,000 a year, and closed catheter systems cost around $15,000 a year. We're working to provide our system for just $2,400 a year, providing a cost benefit to both insurers and users alike. And the way that we're going to get there is through a direct-to-consumer reimbursed brand. The reason that we feel strongly about this is durable medical equipment distributors typically command a 40 to 60% margin on every product that they sell, and that cost goes directly to the consumer and to the payer. The other issue is that a lot of durable medical equipment distributors are actually owned by catheter manufacturers. Convatec owns 180 Medical, Coloplast owns Comfort Medical, Bard owns Liberator Medical. And through that influence, they subtly influence the products that people end up with for their financial gain. And so we're trying to step outside that system to pass on savings to our users. At the helm of Cathbuddy, we have a well-qualified executive team. I'm Souvik Paul, the CEO, and prior to Cathbuddy, I was a design strategist at Johnson & Johnson with a focus on consumer medical devices. Our chief medical advisor is Dr. Daniel Wallen. He's a practicing urologist at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston and a member of the clinical faculty at Harvard Medical School. We've been working with expert remote collaborators in a hub and spoke model. Our product development team includes a gentleman who actually helps to define the standards for steam sterilizers that are used in hospitals. And he has over 30 years of experience in medical device reprocessing. We have a strong strategic advisory board that includes clinicians. It includes my friend Karina, whose accident started the basis for this entire company, as well as product development experts, commercialization, and microbiology experts as well. We've historically not raised very much money at all. We got the company started with a $65,000 friends and family, but despite that, we've been able to make a lot of progress. We're currently in the middle of raising a round to get through product development and the development of our regulatory and reimbursement strategies. We expect to get to market sometime in 2022 through a Class 2 de novo pathway. We've also managed to gather a lot of non-dilutive funding for the company, including the generous grant that the Praxis Spinal Cord Institute is providing to us through this accelerator, which is made possible through support from the Government of Canada and the University of Waterloo. So we're really appreciative of that support. And to close, we're disrupting an industry that hasn't meaningfully changed in the last 40 years. A reusable system makes sense for so many reasons. It allows us to save our users from avoidable UTIs, save insurers hundreds of millions of dollars a year, and also save the environment to boot. Really happy to be here and to answer any questions that you might have.
Great, thank you so much, Sovik. So I see a question, but Fred, since all the companies had to answer one of your questions, do you want to open and then I'll go ahead and share the other questions?
Hi, Sovik. So Sovik is in New York, actually, of all places. Yes. Yeah, and Sovik, do you have any? I'm going to ask the same question as I asked Nader. Do you have any plans to open a branch in Canada or to establish here, have some R&D here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that this program has been really instrumental in opening our eyes to the possibilities kind of north of the border. I think that one of the drawbacks of being located close to New York City is that there's just a ton of myopia here around what's possible elsewhere. And the Praxis Accelerator has been really great in terms of allowing us to really explore what it means to go through a Health Canada approval, to sell our product in Canada, and to really understand the landscape of what catheterization looks like, where, some health technology assessments, I forget the specific province that, I think it was Ontario, but, they recommend that people reuse their catheters because single-use catheterization hasn't been, like, the cost benefit of it isn't well established. And so a market like that clearly understands some of the very same issues that we're contending with through the design of our system. And so will be exploring laying down roots in Canada in the near future.
Fantastic. Thank you. Go ahead, Arushi.
Yeah, great. So Carly from University of Waterloo has two questions. She asked the first one first, where, with your sensor technology that's kind of further down your product pipeline, would the data from the reusable sensor be sent? What does the user interface look like? Or what is your idea around the user interface?
Yeah, these are great questions. And as Arushi noted, this part of the evolution of the Cathbuddy system is certainly still under development. So it would really appreciate feedback from the community and from the folks at Praxis. So right now we have each catheter being tagged with RFID in order to track how many times it's been used in the context of our system, but that chip can double as a storage mechanism for any kind of data that we gather through sensors that are placed into the catheter. And so we're in the process of submitting grants to support the development of a smart catheter by integrating flexible electronics into the catheter itself. Some of the parameters that we're thinking about monitoring through the catheter are things like pH and flow rate and total volume that exits the bladder. And in terms of user interface, essentially, when the user loads the catheter onto into their sterilizer, the sterilizer will be able to read all of the data coming from those catheters. So this will happen once or twice a day, depending on how frequently people are sterilizing their catheters. The sterilizer itself will have cloud connectivity, and that information can then be shared with the individual's physician. It could show up on a personalized dashboard. We would have to obviously be very careful about transmitting personal information that way, so we'd have to have a HIPAA compliant cloud architecture, but we'd also want to make sure that the data that we're sending is meaningful and actionable to all the stakeholders involved.
Great. So question from John Chinesky, part of our consumer team. Hi, John. He says, how long are the catheters? Can you reiterate that?
Yeah, so we are targeting a 15-inch effective length for the catheter. So effective length just means the flexible part that's actually going into the body. We've looked at urethral length studies in men and women, and 2 standard deviations away from the mean for men, it tends to be around 12 inches. And so we believe that we'll have most of the population covered with a 15-inch urethral catheter. And we're doing the same thing for men and women, just because I know from talking to people that I've met over the years that if there's a woman in a chair, sometimes they'll prefer using male catheters because then they don't have to transfer to the toilet. So that's like one thing that makes life a little bit easier. So we didn't see the need to necessarily create a shorter catheter just for women, especially because when the catheter is looped up, it's quite portable. So we didn't think that we were cutting corners by doing that.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Carly from Waterloo has another question. She says, can you clarify the sterilization method of this product? Did you say steam or?
Yeah, so we're using steam sterilization. And the reason that we chose that is it's reliable. It's considered the gold standard by the FDA. And so we wanted to choose a methodology that was safe, that didn't have potentially toxic ramifications for users. Other consumer sterilization products utilize things like UV or ozone, and both can negatively impact the health of users. So we want to avoid those.
And I think from initial conversations with the powers that be, it sounds like that your standard is almost above what is regulatory. I mean, we don't want to speak too much of what the regulatory requirements are stating initially.
Yeah, so based off of our pre-submission that we submitted to the FDA and the FDA's response, the FDA considers intermittent catheters to be semi-critical devices. So the standard of cleanliness for reused catheters, without being too technical, involves what's called high-level disinfection. And we're actually targeting terminal sterilization for our catheters in the sterilizer, which means that we're basically working to exceed the standard.
Great. So Pat has a question. I'm really liking Pat from Genome BC's commercial questions. He wants you to elaborate on the IP status. I know there've been some updates as well.
Yeah, so actually our first patent issued this week, which—
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so that patent covers the design of the sterilizer, and it was filed with the benefit of a provisional patent that was filed back in 2018. And so that's, kind of where the purview of our intellectual property starts. In that patent application, we actually disclosed the invention of our reusable catheter and our insertion aid. And so we're actually working with our patent attorneys right now to file 2 additional continuation patents by the end of next week. So one patent has already been issued. We have 1 continuation patent already submitted. We have 2 continuation patents on the way to being submitted.
And can you, for like a lay person, explain what those continuation patents will allow you to do and what additional protections they provide?
Yeah, so the way that continuation patents work is they essentially keep the patent application alive in the patent office, which means that as long as we're protecting intellectual property that was disclosed in the original patent application, we can take advantage of the earlier filing date that dates back to April 2018. So basically that just gives us priority in terms of how the patent office is reviewing the patents and the claims. And it allows us to basically carve out 3 distinct territories of intellectual property. As we continue through product development, our goal is to submit what are known as continuation in part patents, which essentially can be completely new disclosures to the patent office, but it prevents our own patent from being used against us as prior art.
Just a little glimpse into the complexity of patent, but I mean, sorry, I'm just going to push to get to get us really clear is, what would you say is the novel kind of key pieces of your technology that allow, like that, you know, for the audience here, 50 of us, like what are the novel pieces, just like very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sterilizer is a closed system. So basically it's only going to work with our catheters and insertion aids. And I'm seeing some of the other questions, so I'll try to hit those as well. So each catheter and insertion aid can be reused up to 100 times. And we've done some work with the Cornell Center for Material Research to validate that. And another part of the novel IP of the sterilizer is the fact that we have redundant sensors in the sterilizer validating that it's hitting the criteria needed for sterilization each and every time it's used. So it's self-calibrating in that way, to address Penny's question. Okay, and so with the catheter and the insertion aid, we, you know, part of the novelty is the anatomically compatible features of both of the insertion aids. And then the catheter itself has been reinforced for to prevent biofilm formation and to basically make it sturdier. And those are the elements that we're trying to protect there.
Jess from our clinical team has a question around use.
Yeah, and so it can be reused 100 times. So basically, the way that it'll work is an individual carries around 6 catheters with them throughout the day. They'll use each of them in sequence, bring them home, rinse them out, put them in the sterilizer, and sterilize them. And that counts as 1 reuse. And they can do that up to 100 times. So a supply of 6 catheters should last an individual for 3 months in a typical use case. And in terms of where we're at and our plans for doing clinical trials, we're in the middle of product development. So we're one of the earlier stage companies in this year's cohort, but we plan to complete that by the end of the year. We are planning on doing clinical trials next year. We've identified the Kessler Institute in New Jersey as an early pilot clinical trial, but are looking to find additional partners that we could have host trials with.
Great. Thank you so much, Sovik, and thank you for the great questions.
Thank you.
Great. So last but not the least, I have the pleasure of introducing Rehabtronics. Rehabtronics also presented at our November event in partnership with Ontario Brain Institute, OBI. And so a little bit about Rehabtronics. Rehabtronics is a neural interface technology company. They develop neural interfacing and neuroprosthetic technologies for rehabilitation and function restoration. While working with users, they became aware of a significant unmet medical need: pressure injuries. Rehabtronics has developed a proprietary technology for preventing this costly and deadly medical complication. So I'd like to introduce Rahul Samant, who's our CEO. Take it away, Rahul.
You did. There we go. I'll unmute myself first. So let me just share my screen. There we go. All right, you guys should be seeing my screen now. So fantastic. Great to be here. I have the wonderful task of being between everybody here and the weekend. So I'll do my best to make it not too long. But first thing I want to say is it's a pleasure. It's an honor to be part of this accelerator, to be part of being selected. I'm truly humbled by just the cohort, the people, the other 4 companies, and the people that are there. And I really feel honored just to be a part of that group. So thanks to Rushi, to Fred, to all those involved in the Praxis. So far, it's been just a wonderful, wonderful experience. So as Arushi mentioned, oh, what's going on here? There we go. We are a neural interface medical technology company. We are a spin out of the University of Alberta. We've developed 3 of our own products. You can see them here: the Rejoice, the Retouch, and the Regrasp, and they're for upper limb rehabilitation. And these are marketed, we do around the world through both direct sales into hospitals as well as using a distribution network in 20 or so countries. But while working with the folks that use our devices, you know, people with stroke, people with spinal cord injury, we saw a medical complication that many of these people have, and that's pressure injuries. And as we started to look at this medical complication, we realized the magnitude of the impact that it has. And we really felt that we need to do something about this. And so our goal is to prevent these deadly pressure injuries. And if we can do this, we can have an enormous clinical impact. We could save tens of thousands of lives. You know, they kill over about 60,000 people every year in the US alone. And we could help healthcare systems capture billions of unnecessary spending. So in the US, it's estimated the hospitals spend upwards of 27 billion every year in treating hospital-acquired pressure injuries. So how do pressure injuries form? Well, what happens is that when you apply pressure to soft tissue, that tissue becomes compressed, obviously, it becomes deformed, and blood and oxygen and nutrients are limited, and so it's restricted. Causing a state of ischemia in that tissue. And when you have this, that tissue starts to die, and it does this deep inside. And then that injury, that deep tissue injury, makes its way outward, and eventually it breaks the skin and reveals this massive wound, this full thickness pressure ulcer. Wounds like this, pressure injuries like this, are very expensive to treat. This injury will cost maybe $150,000 to treat this injury. But more troubling is that most people that develop an injury like this will die. 70% of people that have an injury like this in a hospital will die within 1 year. And so research at the U of A asked a really simple question: why don't we all get pressure injuries? You know, we've been sitting here for several hours, and none of us are going to get we're not getting, we're not all going to get a pressure injury. And the reason is because people without mobility and sensation deficits have a subconscious muscle reaction. They have a muscle contraction. And this contraction acts like a pump. It brings fresh blood, oxygen, and nutrients into that muscle. But people with mobility and sensation deficits, they lack this natural response. And so they succumb to this ischemia and they develop a pressure injury. So we're doing something very simple. We've developed a patent technology we call IES, intermittent electrical stimulation, and we provide that brief muscle contraction. And we've shown that this IES increases muscle oxygenation by almost 30%, and it reduces deep tissue injury volume by 80%. We've tested this technology in hospitals in Alberta, so 68 patients in a variety of different clinical settings, all considered at risk of developing a pressure injury, have used the preventative measure. We would have expected to see somewhere between 6 and 14 injuries. We saw none in any of these patients. What's more is the nurses were very, very receptive to the technology. It was super easy to use. It takes about 6 minutes of nursing time every 12 hours. So why is this such an important thing to do now? Well, there's the obvious reasons, the fact that there's tens of thousands of people dying every year. Something needs to be done. The economic consequences, of course. But in the US, what's particularly interesting is hospitals are no longer reimbursed for hospital-acquired pressure injuries. So hospitals have to pay for any injuries that patients get in the hospital. This costs hospitals an estimated between $11 to $27 billion every year. Now, despite these two rather shocking things, the economic and human consequences, there's been no innovation in this space in nearly 100 years. We're literally still doing the same thing we did 100 years ago. We either turn patients or we use a mattress. That is the best that healthcare practitioners have. More needs to be done. This is a space ripe for disruptive technologies. The product is quite simple. We call it Prolivia, which is Latin for pressure prevention. We're using old technology in a new way. So it comprises a stimulator over here on the left that creates the electrical stimulation pattern, and of course, surface electrodes that apply to the skin over top of the tissue at risk. The electrodes are disposable and are the key revenue driver, the primary revenue driver. We're estimating about a $50 per patient day usage in revenue generation from the consumables. So for a patient that stays an average of 4 days, that's about $200 per patient. So 300-bed hospital will generate a little over $900,000 in annual recurring revenue. So what does that look like for, say, that hospital, where it's an enormous opportunity to capture millions in hospital-acquired pressure injury treatment costs that they're not being reimbursed for. So if we look at a 300-bed hospital with a little bit less than 1% incidence of hospital-acquired pressure injury rate, that hospital is going to spend over $10 million on the treatment costs that they're not going to be reimbursed for. If we can prevent just 1/3 of those injuries, we can save that hospital $2.5 million. We view the market, if you look at the US Canadian market, we view it in 3 distinct segments. There are the home care, so consumer segment, long-term care, so skilled nursing facilities, and of course the acute and ICU. We're going to be focusing in on acute and ICU hospitals. Looking at, there's about 37 million admissions every year in Canada and the US alone. 25% of those people would be considered at significant risk of developing a pressure injury. So that's about a $2 billion opportunity, again, just in the US and Canada alone. Our team is quite experienced. We've worked in health tech for a number of years. I myself have worked in both pharma and medical devices. We've developed 3 of our own products, as you saw. We've navigated the FDA regulatory pathway as well as CE, and we're ISO certified. We do have sales experience, both business to business and business to enterprise. Peter, my COO, has done sales into Fortune 500 companies like Mercedes-Benz. We've sold directly to hospitals, and we have an extensive distribution channel. With that said, we are looking to add another senior level executive in the chief product officer position. We also have a world-class group of directors and advisors. I want to point out here our wonderful 2 guys that we're working with very, very closely here at Praxis, and it's been a pleasure to work with both Hans and Gabe. And so, we've accomplished quite a bit already. We've developed our prototype. We've demonstrated the mechanism of action, as you saw. We did a 68-person pilot study, and we just recently got Health Canada approval to start a clinical trial, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we couldn't have got there without a number of different partners, including these hospitals in Alberta, the German Canadian Centre for Innovation, NRC Canada, and I'm really happy once again to add Praxis to that list. For us, the next 18-24 months look something like this. We're going to be wrapping up our product development, and we anticipate 510(k) clearance by the end of this calendar year. That's going to clear us to start marketing in the US. We want to start initiating US pilot studies with hospitals in early 2021, and we're anticipating first revenues in the US towards the end of 2021. Concurrent to that, we're going to start this clinical trial here in Canada that we just got clearance for. The first site, the Cross Cancer Institute in Edmonton, will be coming online on July 1. And we're looking to add other Canadian hospital sites into that clinical study to dramatically reduce the timeline of that study. At the same time, over the next several months, we're going to be opening a seed financing round. We're looking to raise $750,000 in capital.
Great, thanks so much. Fred, do you want to offer Rahul a question?
Sure, Rahul. Thanks for the nice words about us. I was just curious to know, since now we're in COVID times, right? Mm-hmm. And the hospitals are having a number of patients with this disease. Have you ever thought about the incidence, or have you ever studied the number of patients that are developing pressure injuries in COVID, or what is your plan to tackle?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's really sadly these COVID-19 patients are actually at greater risk of developing a pressure injury than most patients you'd see, because they have pneumonia, they're hypoxic, they lack oxygen in their muscles, in their tissue, and they're generally sedated and they're very immobile. Luckily for us, we want to add sites, and this could be challenging for us. It's very difficult right now to get any bandwidth from critical care centers because of COVID-19. I suspect, and we hope that as they start to see pressure injuries as a problem, it's going to be a sad day when critical care staff run around to save a COVID-19 patient only to see them succumb to a pressure injury. And as it pains me to say, I think that as people see this happening, they'll be looking more and more for things that they can do that they can bring into their hospitals to prevent these injuries. We've already been in discussion with a critical care researcher in Ottawa who expressed this as a concern that it is a problem in the ICU in his ICU in Ottawa.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions? Everyone is, oh, we've got one here. Yeah, so Jess, part of our clinical team, Rahul, is asking, is the device meant to be used in conjunction with other interventions, such as turning and pressure mattresses, or to replace them entirely?
Yeah, so our initial entry will be it'll be a standard of care plus. It's a difficult bar to get to say that we can remove standard of care. So this is really it's a standard of care plus. But I think when you look at what's happening in the standard of care and the fact that 60,000 people still die, clearly we need standard of care plus something.
Great. Johanna is commenting that a lot of COVID patients are placed in a prone position. So how do you address them building pressure sores on different parts of the body, including the face?
Yeah, the face would be with our technology. Admittedly, the face would be challenging. There isn't a, I'm not sure if. I guess there's some muscle tissue there. We haven't ever looked at the face, to be honest. But other areas that will be in contact with the mattress would be things like the chest, or the hips and the thighs, and those are like good sources of tissue. There's lots to stimulate there. And I'm quite certain if we could easily apply to, say, the pectorals or the hip flexors or the quads.
Got it. Charlene, who's part of our knowledge translation team, and Rahul, I hope you get introduced to Charlene someday soon. She says, do you foresee the recruitment of individuals with community-acquired pressure injury in the clinical trial, or only hospital-acquired?
Yeah, it's a great question. Obviously, we see potential for the product in the community, and we want to get it into the community. Adding community-based people in a trial is as I'm sure many of the researchers on this call are aware, is very, very challenging. It can, while there is a high incidence of pressure injuries in community-based populations, it can be the time horizon can be very, very long. And so one could wait a very long time to see a community-based study participant develop a pressure injury. So for the moment, our trial will be focused on hospital patients.
Great. Pat from Genome BC is asking, in the 510K study, what was the predicate device?
In the 510K. So we haven't filed the 510K yet. We're researching predicate devices right now, but all the devices we're looking at are ubiquitously, they are electrical stimulators. We're even considering using our own device, the regrasp, as a predicate device.
Great. So I do acknowledge we're a few minutes over, folks, but we will send you home in the next couple minutes, so don't worry. So Jess is asking, how often do the electrodes need changing, and are they cleanable if they become soiled?
So in the hospital usage case, they're disposable. What we found when we went to critical and acute care hospitals in the US, in Alberta, the nurses just want to throw it away. They're not going to waste their time cleaning it. They're just going to throw it away. So right now, the usage case is disposable electrodes in the hospital. They change them every 12 hours. In a community-based environment, when we went into home care usage, we found people would reuse them, and understandably so. It's not the cheapest solution for a community-based individual to spend $50 a day, and they can be used until they essentially stop. The hydrogel gets broken down or they get dirty. That's usually the indication that we give with our existing electrical stimulation product, our regrasp. We say, inspect the electrode on a daily basis.
Great. Chris is asking, since the product is prevention focused, are you recommending, again, the piece around use outside the hospital setting, or are you only focusing on the ICU setting where there are more mobility challenges? Have you considered its use in ER, in emergency rooms, where many hospital-acquired pressure injuries can begin?
Yeah, excellent question. So yes, we want to see it percolate into all areas of healthcare because pressure injuries happen in all areas of healthcare. We've chosen critical and acute care because they occur in a very short period of time. A patient will develop they'll be there for 4 days and they'll develop a pressure injury. Emergency care is an excellent example, so is surgical care. But we're focusing on critical and acute care because it's an environment that lends itself very well to the clinical trial that we've designed.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for the questions, and thank you, Rahul, for presenting so energetically and being last. You know, we're about to close our event. Thank you, Rahul. I want to make two observations, and then I'll call on Bill to close formally. So, as a lot of you mentioned, we had to run this program virtually, and we got 2 weeks to pivot. So I really want to thank the community, and there's the entire Praxis team that includes IT, HR, everyone coming behind this vision to make this happen. It was a village to raise an accelerator, and our partners in supporting us in doing that very quickly. The testament of the cohort and their patience with the cohort, and just being witness to what's been happening behind the scenes for 1 month. It's been truly breathtaking. One thing Fred did when we were our first week into the program, he called me and he said, "Arushi, I never thought it would be this amazing." So I have to definitely echo that. So thank you all for attending. The other point I want to make is asks and offers. Culture in our accelerator is, if you have ask, if you have an offer to a company or to a collaborator, do make those. And so all of you have mine and doing those emails, and you have the SCI Accelerate email. So this is not a goodbye, this is a hello. So please do offer, or if you have any ideas, we want to keep the conversation going, and the companies may have some asks as well. So the point of this is really to make some of those connections happen, and we might follow up with some of you as the conversation develops. Bill, we're going to include you as a panelist, correct? We're going to add Bill to close. Thank you, Nader. So Nader from PathMaker says, wonderful job done by Fred, Arushi, and Danilo to pivot and make this program happen virtually. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Wow, what an exciting, energizing afternoon this has been, and very inspiring. And I would like to say, you know, congratulations to all of you, Fred, Arushi, the whole team, the mentors, you know, the companies, you know, for pivoting as I think you've described it, Arushi, at the last minute. Nobody really knew how this was going to come off, but it's just been fantastic. The presentations have been great. The questions have been phenomenal. Before this began, I turned to Fred and I said, you know, Fred, have you ever heard of a virtual accelerator before? And he said, well, I think Techstars. And so, yeah, I think that was really the only one that you and I had heard of before. So everybody on this webinar, you're all pioneers. This is quite amazing. You know, it's very exciting. One of the challenges we have with the Institute with Spinal Cord Injury is when we've talked to innovators and commercialists in the past, they often identified spinal cord injury as not really having a large population. So they wondered really how they were going to make money, how they're going to make it a viable business. And I think the message we had provided to them was, you know, well, you know, you can try out your idea with our platform, with our model within this spinal cord injury database that we have, proof concept, and you can find your denominator to make it a successful business in the broader community. And I think, you know, this is one of the key things that many of the companies have demonstrated on the webinar today, on the call, is that in fact is quite possible, that you can find your denominator elsewhere. There are about 3 dozen different secondary complications that people with a spinal cord injury are more vulnerable to. So these are not unique to spinal cord injury, but if you have a spinal cord injury, you're much more likely to be vulnerable to them. But what it does mean is that when you find a successful solution to a problem, then it often has application to a whole bunch of things. And not only is commercially viable, but it makes a big difference to people. And that's really what we're about. We're about making an impact. And along those lines, you know, today, and this accelerator wouldn't be possible, the Accelerate program wouldn't be possible without terrific support from different partners. And I know they've been mentioned previously, but I think it's warranted to do it again without the support of Western Economic Diversification. I think a couple of folks are on in the audience today from WD. Pat, so glad you could join us from Genome BC. Wonderful support from GBC. Karim, great to hear from you. University of Waterloo, fantastic partner. For our American friends, University of Waterloo, I think, has been named the most innovative university in Canada for more than 2 decades consecutively. It's an amazing school. I know this term is overused, world class, but you know they are really, really outstanding, and we've got some great universities in this country, so they're in great company. And of course, our amazing mentors. Incredible people, and had a phenomenal impact, phenomenal feedback on the quality of those people even before the program began. So we're really excited. This is our inaugural Accelerate cohort, and we couldn't be prouder. And we're really, really excited about what the future holds. And you know, we're all in this together. The COVID is teaching us all that if we didn't know it already. And your success is our success. If you're successful, we'll be successful in our mission, and that's to make a difference. So with that, thanks so much for joining us today on behalf of the Institute. And I wish everyone well wishes and success. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for participating.
Bye-bye.